I've decided to discuss the benefits of moving out. I'm going to be using my experience since I moved out a little over a year ago. I left from O'Fallon, Missouri, and I came here to Evansville, Indiana, and I'm going to be discussing the benefits of everything that's happened since. So I'm going to start my explanation off with packing and planning it took to pick up and move in with my grandmother for, I think it was a couple months. It was a different experience telling my coworkers and friends that I'm leaving, even more so to actually pick up and leave. It hurt at the time, and it's easier now, but it never really goes away. I mean, little did I know at the time of what would come of my new adventure. It was slow at first, just unpacking and looking for a new job and getting used to the area. A lot of self doubt and second guessing in that period. I wondered if I wanted to keep going or just stop and go back. What happened in the whole saga isn't important, so we'll start with just work. Got a job at Pittsburgh Glass Works, just inspecting and packing glass, 12 hours a night, 5 to 7 days a week. The pay was great, but I wasn't enjoying it, nor did I have time to do anything with myself as a person. I mean, I realized I couldn't do this anymore and ended up quitting. This brought me to a much lower paying job closer to me. This is when I worked as a cashier at Lowe's. The issue there was more my schedule was just too random. Some days I'd work nights, some days I'd work days, and my schedules would be anything in between. From Lowe's, I went across the road to Walmart, realizing my preference of a nearby job. This time, the pay is within a better standing, and my hours were much more consistent, despite the early shifts of 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day I work. I've picked up little things that I like and prefer and what I want to look for future jobs. Next, I'm going to bring up my relationships I've had while here. For starters, I met Dakota Greathouse. We dated for 2 months, during which I learned my communication skills and empathy severely lacked. I started out pretty heartless, to be honest. The girl who came after her was the biggest impression of my life. Charity, Dakota's best friend and roommate. Honestly, it was a pretty bad idea, but I don't regret it. I have never felt as I did to her as I have for anyone before or after. So when it ended so shortly after it started, around a month in, I was devastated. After a while of being alone, I found my current partner, Caitlin, who I care for, but even now I'm unsure because it's just not the same, even though I really do care for her. My relationships have had a tremendous impact on me. I learned that I do have emotion. I can feel, aside from frustration and apathy, though some were liars and some were cheaters. Some cared a lot more than others. Life isn't always kind, but what's happened in the past, all I can do is learn from what's happened and take this into the future with me. Learned a similar lesson with residency, despite not being the main takeaway. As we know, I moved out from my mother's and in with my grandmother. The specifics bring me living with Dakota for about a month or so. I stayed with my grandmother as I secretly dated Charity. I had been making plans for a buddy of mine to move in from Alabama to an apartment I was getting. A lot of drama later, he bails on me and moves in with Charity and Dakota. Yeah, that hadn't gone well for any of them or me, and in the end, he went back to Alabama. The lesson I learned from this tells me I can't just trust people blindly, even if they're my friends. More so, I was completely alone in an apartment for 3 months. I realized I couldn't stand being alone like that I wasn't as fine with it as I always thought I would be. Around the time I quit PGW, I moved out of my apartment early, started my classes at Full Sail. This itself is for me realizing that I couldn't do factory work forever. It's just not for me. That's why I'm telling you this story. It's a good transition into my next point. My mother. There's a long history and a reason I wanted to move out to begin with. That aside, she is my mother, and I do have obligations and reasons I have to remain in contact with her. For a while, it was my insurance until recently, where I learned I never had any to begin with. Such as never had any to begin with. She has a habit of simply making life harder than it needs to be. Such as with the FAFSA in school, I ended up doing everything for her, and she still almost made me drop out because of deadlines. Or, I mean, how recently I lost my car just because, you know, she managed to mess up my insurance and I couldn't afford my own. Things aren't always good, and you just have to keep moving. Maybe it will change one day, but that doesn't matter. Just focus and keep going. Throughout this last year, a lot has undergone, and I am a way different person than who I was at the beginning. I figured a lot out about myself and as of others. It's an adventure to leave home. I hope it will always remain an adventure. And I'd like to believe, with the right train of thought, that even the worst situations can help you further yourself. And always offer a lesson if you are willing to see it and use it. It will be hard. These choices and paths will take a lot from one person to understand what's going to come of them. This misconception that we all hold about life being easy, it's simply wrong. I simply encourage all of you to be the best of who you are and can be, and I hope none of you ever lose focus.